hygiene, and other efforts in the context of church operations. On Friday, the Division of Emergency Management issued new guidance to support churches in their transition to this temporary method of worship. And I encourage everyone to review this information at kdheks.gov/coronavirus. That said, I strongly encourage all faith leaders to embrace alternative forms of worship that do not involve in-person congregation. I'll speak more to that in a moment. This was a difficult decision and could not come at a more disappointing time. Kansans are a community of faithful people. We draw strength from fellowship and prayer. We rely on our pastors and our priests, our rabbis and our imams, and all of our religious leaders for guidance and counsel, especially at times of sorrow, uncertainty, and hardship, and especially during Holy Week. This morning, I spoke with several faith leaders across Kansas and explained what made today's decision necessary. I was encouraged and deeply grateful that many churches across Kansas had already recognized the danger of congregating in person and had proactively taken steps to celebrate Passover, Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter Sunday in an alternative way. I'm uplifted by their creativity and their resolve. Churches are live streaming services and bringing their parishioners together over Facebook Live for Bible study. They're hosting drive-in sermons so churchgoers can listen from their cars and offering other options so that they can continue to observe their rituals. Kansans of all faith traditions are embracing alternative forms of worship because they recognize that the physical church itself, while sacred and beloved, has never defined their deep and abiding faith. It's also worth noting that practicing churchgoers are not the only Kansans whose cherished annual traditions are being disrupted at this very special time of year. Easter Sunday holds a deep meaning for thousands of Kansas families, regardless of whether they are members of a particular religious institution. Easter egg hunts, big Sunday dinners with extended family and friends, bunnies and baskets of candy for young children wearing new outfits. These are defining family customs that have all been put on pause for everyone. In fact, for the first time in decades, there was no Easter egg hunt at the governor's residence on the Saturday before Palm Sunday. I read recently that the Lewisburg Cider Mills Easter egg hunt, a long-standing community tradition for 20 years, involving 10,000 eggs hidden throughout 20 acres of land, was also canceled. This time of year is one defined by renewal, celebration, and community for people of all faiths. The disruptions created by this global public health crisis have forced us all to approach it differently, regardless of our religious beliefs. I want to thank all Kansans for their continued spirit of sacrifice at this unprecedented time. These mitigation efforts are a primary defense against COVID-19. Adhering to them not only protects you and your family, but also your neighbors, your fellow congregants. If we've learned anything in recent weeks, it's that physical distance does not keep us apart. Many religious texts call on us to love our neighbors as ourselves. So, although it will happen virtually this year, we will continue to celebrate each other, worship with one another, and pray for each other on Easter Sunday and always. And with that, I'll take questions.
Could you explain to the Governor precisely what your executive order does?
The Executive Order 2018 places the same limits on mass gatherings that we placed in the original stay-home order. So there can be no more than 10 in any given area, and even those 10 need to be appropriately distanced from one another, and then hygiene methods need to be engaged, so the wiping off of surfaces.
Extends that that problem specifically to churches?
This is specific to churches and to funerals.
Why wasn't this done earlier, the first executive order? What took me so long to do this?
We hoped that there was not a need to do this and that there would just be self-regulation, and by and large, there was. Most of the churches across the state of Kansas, I talked to probably 10, 12 faith leaders from all across the state. Most all of them had already implemented these stay-home guidelines, limiting to 10, social distancing, but there were a few that did not. And so we felt it in the best interest of all Kansans to ensure that what people were doing, mostly voluntarily, had to be done by all.
These 3 outbreaks related to the religious gatherings, do you know what kind of numbers are associated with those? How many people were infected?
Not specifically for each of the gatherings, no.
On a more personal level, do you normally attend Easter Mass, or are you gonna, or church, or are you not? What's it gonna be like?
I will not be going to Mass on Easter Sunday.
Any other questions?
Governor, the situation at Lansing, are there additional steps being taken there at other prisons, and do we know the condition of any of those who are infected?
So what Sherman is asking about is the situation in our correctional institutions, most specifically Lansing. Yes, I was just on the phone with Secretary of Corrections Jeff Smuda and a couple of other people from the agency. And they are doing a number of things. One, we're fortunate in Lansing to actually have the extra building that hasn't been moved into yet, and so we'll be able to use that to quarantine, and that is being done. That's given us an additional infirmary, so the prisoners who had tested positive for coronavirus have been able to be quarantined over in that other infirmary. Any of the staff who tested positive are self-isolated. We believe that they're all at home, they're not needing to be in the hospital. So all of that is happening. Then we're also going through the list of those who were close to release anyway, and looking to see which ones of those have what we call viable plans. Do they have a place to live? Do they have a job? Do they have what it takes to be released successfully back into the community? And we're processing all of that, and hopefully we'll be able to move quite a few of those folks back into their communities. We want to make sure that before we let folks out, though, that we've got things in place that will make sure that they have a good chance of success. And also that it won't be a shock to any one particular community. So we're working with local officials on that too. There will be no surprises. Everybody will know what's coming.
2 quick questions. One, I checked this before I came over here, and the new first-time jobless applications have not been updated on the Department of Labor site yet.
I'm sorry, Jim, I didn't hear.
The first-time jobless applications, if they had not been updated, that happens on Tuesday. But the new numbers aren't out yet. Have you seen them?
I have not seen those numbers, no.
I listened to their Facebook Live presentation every morning. There seems to be more technical problems, mounting frustration. What are you hearing as governor? Is that a situation that is close to being under control?
I was actually listening to the governor of Connecticut this morning talking about the problems that they're having, and he brought up the fact that so many of our departments of labor across the country are still on the Cobalt system, very, very old technology. And our Department of Labor had recognized that that was an issue and had initiated modernization. And unfortunately, that's something that takes time. This interfered, and they really had to cease the transition to a much more robust system. And so they're operating on really old stuff. And then when you talk about, 12 times as many applications coming in at one time, 877,000 phone calls in one day, that's going to overwhelm a good system, much less the kind of system that we were stuck with. So They are doing everything that they possibly can. We are moving staff from other agencies who cannot work in their own agency right now because of, the inability to work at home. But we're gearing some of them up to be able to take some of the burden off of the Department of Labor and hopefully be able to get those applications in and get those checks out.
Sorry, I've been talking to a lot of people who are going to be involved next week in updating the consensus revenue estimates. And there is so much that they don't even understand that was in the recent federal bill. So many things happening at once. They're really worried about coming up with a number that is at all within the realm of reality. How close do you think, given the circumstances, they'll be able to come to pegging a number that's at all reliable?
It's going to be very, very difficult to come up with, a number that's going to be based on real data because we don't have the data. We will take what we have and we'll just take some common sense and inject it into those estimates. And I would expect that the estimates will be extraordinarily conservative to protect us as we're going forward, so that we are not basing our budgets or our agency activities on numbers that may not come to fruition. Better to be safe than sorry in this situation.
How good shape are we in now, given where the legislature left things relative to the projected ending balance for this fiscal year and heading into the next year?
I think I think, and again, we really haven't seen the full impact of this yet. We will, towards the end of April, start to have a much better idea of how much this is really impacting us. But I'm optimistic that we will be able to get through this fiscal year. We're in fiscal year 20 now. I think we'll be able to get through this okay. We are working with our agencies now, to tell them to, rein in spending wherever you possibly can. If you don't need it, don't buy it. And so we're doing that to just ensure that we're okay. And then we're going to have to wait for the revenue estimates to know what we're going to need to do to get through fiscal year 21. And we'll have a much better idea what the federal money impact will be on us. And we'll also know, right now we've got the third stimulus package out there, and we're still trying to decipher that. I fully expect that there's going to be another stimulus package coming down from the federal government.
Some governors across the country have already started to cut spending. You don't feel the need to do that here?
No, not in this particular fiscal year. I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to need to make any cuts. We are asking our agencies, though, if it's not something you absolutely have to have right now, don't get it. Just, hold on to the money.
Sorry, one more quick question. Are you hopeful that the legislature can come back here for instance, there's a bill that you want, and Secretary Bernhardt wants, to talk about these third-party vendors in terms of the compensating use tax, collecting sales taxes. That could be a very important thing, given the fact that people are saying home buying online now from the revenue. I mean, are you hopeful they can get back and take care of a few things like that?
It would have been really nice if we could have gotten that done because, as we're going to be losing revenue from income taxes, for instance, it would have been nice to have others available there. It didn't happen. I doubt very much that if the legislature is able to come back, that's something that they're going to address. I really want them to focus on Medicaid expansion and get that done, because while Medicaid expansion won't make any difference right now, the long-term impact of this crisis, both on our economy and on our health system, is going to be huge, and it's going to be long. So we're going to definitely need that Medicaid expansion, that $1 billion that will come in from the federal government through Medicaid expansion. We're going to need that very badly next year. And so that's what I need the legislature to do, is come back here and get that done.
Do you think the current circumstances of the emergency strengthen the case for getting that done?
Well, I don't know what else could any more than this. I mean, if ever there were something that proves the need for this. I mean, so much so that even the federal government is saying, we'll cover people on Medicaid right now if they have no insurance. Medicaid will cover any COVID testing and treatment that gets done. So even the federal government, that's never been very enthusiastic about Obamacare, is saying, yeah, this is important.
We had a hospital close last month. Are there others that are in danger of closing because of this crisis?
Well, there are others that have been in danger of closing anyway, and Medicaid expansion would have been helpful to buy them some more time. This situation is going to make it more difficult for all of our hospitals because what has happened is all of the routine appointments, all of the elective surgeries, all of those kinds of things have been put off, and those were huge revenue sources for a hospital. So yes, this crisis will make it much more difficult for all of our hospitals. Those on the brink, will be even closer to the edge of the cliff. I think that there is funding in the federal stimulus bill that will allow us to address some of our hospitals' issues. We don't know exactly how that's going to look yet because we don't have all the details. And we're also looking for ways just within our own state resources to see what we can do to provide a cushion for those hospitals and help them survive this time.
This executive order is another restriction that Kansans are seeing. Is there anything that's giving you optimism right now, either in the state, what numbers you're seeing, or the world, or how people are acting, that this can not be as long as maybe some people think?
I don't think we can predict right now when we're going to be able to lift any of these orders. We are seeing some glimmers of hope. In New York, cases are going down. I mean, they're still ridiculously high, but they are starting. I think they've seen about 3 days of a decrease in the number of new cases. So that's a good sign. But Kansas is probably going to peak a little later than New York. Just because we got started later. And we also, I think, flattened the curve because of some of the robust actions that we took early, so that we'll peak later and we won't go as high, but it'll stretch it out. So I'm not prepared to make any predictions get anybody's hopes up about when we're going to be able to open the doors. I will tell you though, and just to let the folks in Kansas recognize, this will be over. Could it come back in the fall? We don't know yet. But in anticipation of it being over, we are starting to turn our attention now, and we're putting together sort of an economic recovery strategy, and we'll have more on that probably in the coming weeks. We will definitely put, if those of you who are around here back during the recession, if you remember, there was a task force put together to deal with the ARA funds, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Funds. There was a task force put together to, one, how are we going to disperse that funding, and then two, how are we going to get Kansas back on track economically. We will put something like that together this time. We'll be bringing in, obviously, the business community from all the different sectors, bringing in the bankers, bringing in all the folks that we need to help us plot out a strategy to get on the right footing as this comes to an end.
Speaking of that, I've talked to some small business people who were ready to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program that was in the last federal bill, only to find out that the communication from the federal government had been very late. Banks weren't anticipating it, weren't prepared to handle it. Is this another example of how we weren't ready?
What Jim's talking about is the Small Business Administration loans that would be administered through our banking system. There are some banks that deal with those on a regular basis, and for them that it's not that big of a deal, but a lot of our banks don't, and so they have to set up the entire system. The program was, I think, announced at 11 o'clock the night before it was to go into effect. So, those poor lenders were really set up for lots of irate phone calls. I think it's getting better as they've had a little bit more time, but, the rollout of that was not good, and they should have been given more time to prepare.
Any progress on the acquisition of the stuff you talked about yesterday? So you've been the proverbial squeaky wheel the last couple of years.
Obviously not squeaky enough. You know, I have not heard of any shipments that have arrived today. You know, we continue to make our voice heard loud and clear. You know, I think it's absolutely imperative that the president really implement aggressively the Defense Production Act, and that we really have our companies ratcheting up production of the equipment, of the masks, of the tests, all the things that the states need. And yes, I do believe that it is the federal government's responsibility to do that. We cannot do that. I can't enact a Defense Production Act. I can't force companies to do that. The feds can, and the feds also have the infrastructure to provide the distribution that needs to be done on something like this. And we would eliminate this competition between states, which is doing nothing but driving the prices up and directing the supplies and resources to the big kids.
Governor Keller, real quick, going back to religious gatherings, can you tell us what counties these religious gatherings, because you said it was 25%, and obviously if I'm in that county, I'm going to be watching myself closer because I'm going to know that there's more cases in my county. Can you give us the county that religious gatherings happened in?
I think that there were different counties, so I think you could probably take a look at where the clusters are, and you could probably figure it out. I think you know, I wouldn't worry so much about what county. I would just worry every Kansan, no matter whether they've had a positive case in their community or not, should be adhering by these rules and staying home, staying healthy, and saving lives.
Can you address the harassment and hostility that's being directed towards some of the Kansas residents of Chinese heritage?
Yeah, what Sherman is asking is that we've had some acts of aggression towards folks in our Asian American communities. I abhor any acts of aggression, particularly when they are motivated by race, gender, sexual orientation, whatever. So I would ask Kansans to please not do that. This is no one person's fault. No one ethnic group's fault. This is a pandemic that we all have responsibility to ensure goes away, and we all need to do our part.
Thank you. Thank you.